Welcome to the UFO Enigma, where we explore UFOs, extraterrestrial beings, and mysterious science fiction stories. Join us as we embark on thrilling adventures across the vast expanse of the universe. Jonathan Vega, a former Special Forces operative, has just completed a resource survey mission on the planet Naram. However, a cry for help pulls him into a new battle, one against those who seek to destroy the peace between planets. Jonathan Vega's boots sank softly into the wet earth of Naram, the strange alien planet cloaked in an ever-present mist. The atmosphere here felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the planet itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. He was no stranger to difficult environments. He had survived countless battles in the worst conditions, both on Earth and across the stars. But Naram was different. The dense foliage around him seemed alive, pulsing with an almost sentient awareness. His machete, a sleek vibroblade that hummed with power, sliced through the thick vines that lashed out like the tendrils of some ancient creature. The air was thick, saturated with the intoxicating fragrance of alien plants, a mixture of something sweet yet acrid. The jungle felt like it was closing in on him, with the trees pressing against his bare torso, the leaves thick and heavy, damp with the constant drizzle of moisture. The emerald-tinted sunlight filtered weakly through the dense canopy overhead, casting long shadows and creating a kaleidoscope of green hues on the ground. His skin glistened with sweat, each drop of perspiration collecting in the small crevices of his well-defined muscles before dripping down his arms, clinging to his light brown hair that was already damp from the oppressive humidity. His chest heaved as he pushed forward, his breaths shallow but steady. "Damned jungle," he muttered under his breath, wiping a sweaty hand across his forehead, trying to clear his vision. He paused for a moment to check his navigation device, his thumb swiping over the cold, metallic surface of the small screen. A soft beep rang out from the device, a trace element of rhodium registered in the nearby rock formations. That was the only sign of success he had on this miserable excursion. Naram had only recently appeared on trade route charts, its untapped mineral wealth making it a potential gold mine for the Interstellar Trade Commission. But the potential riches were not enough to ease the growing sense of unease that clawed at Jonathan's mind. This wasn't what he had signed up for. The mission had been supposed to be straightforward: survey the resources, report back, collect his bonus credits, and head home. But he found himself deep within a jungle, cut off from his ship the Nomad, and alone. As a former Tehran Special Forces operative, Jonathan was accustomed to harsh conditions, but Naram was testing even his considerable endurance. The heat, the humidity, the thick undergrowth that seemed to have a mind of its own, it was all overwhelming. He had parked his ship a couple of kilometers back, loaded with medical supplies meant for the Sentu outpost in the neighboring system, but now, as his eyes scanned the surroundings, the task ahead seemed far from simple. The piercing scream shattered the humid air, slicing through the oppressive silence like a knife. Jonathan froze, his body rigid with sudden alertness. It was unmistakably female. The scream echoed, desperate, full of terror. Someone, or something, was in pain. His military training kicked in instinctively. His eyes scanned the area in rapid succession, calculating, assessing. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind, but they were overridden by a singular urge: the need to act. Jonathan shoved the navigation device back into his pack, the decision made in an instant. This was no longer a routine mission. He needed to find the source of that scream, to determine who or what was in danger and why. The jungles of Naram had always felt like they were hiding something, like they were watching him as much as he was observing them. But this scream, this was real. This was urgent. His grip tightened around the handle of his vibro machete as he moved, his footsteps now slow, deliberate, and silent. He slipped deeper into the shadows, slipping through the underbrush as his senses sharpened. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot became amplified in his mind. The jungle, which had felt so alien and hostile moments ago, now seemed almost oppressive, closing in on him with every step. It was as though the very environment was urging him to turn back, to abandon the mission. But he couldn't. The scream, the unmistakable cry of a woman, had already set his course. His movements were fluid and predatory, instinctively stalking his way through the thickening vegetation. The jungle seemed to thin slightly as he approached the source of the scream. His muscles tensed, preparing for whatever lay ahead. He crouched low behind a massive fern-like plant, the ferns towering above him like ancient sentinels, their thick leaves blocking his view, but also offering a temporary shield. He peeked through the foliage, his sharp eyes scanning the scene below. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the center of a clearing, surrounded by flickering flames that cast long, unnatural shadows, a group of tribal aliens had gathered. They were tall, gangly creatures, their bodies wrapped in strange patterns of green and brown, their skin constantly shifting like living camouflage. They stood in front of a fire, their limbs long and spindly, their eyes wide and unfocused. The clicking and chittering sounds they made resonated through the air in eerie harmony, their communication more like animalistic chirps than the structured language Jonathan was used to. But what caught his attention was the figure suspended above the flames. A humanoid female, her body bound by crude restraints, was slowly rotating on a makeshift spit, the fire licking at her body, cooking her flesh with cruel precision. Her skin was a pale lavender, smooth yet fragile, like a rare flower caught in the hands of a storm. Her long, straight silver hair hung down, floating in the air, the ends occasionally grazing the flames as she twisted in agony. Jonathan's heart raced as he took in the scene. The woman's eyes, large, almond-shaped, and a shocking shade of amber, caught his gaze. They were filled with pain, fear, and something else. A glimmer of hope. In that moment, Jonathan knew he couldn't just stand by. No matter the risks. No matter the mission. This wasn't just some alien resource survey anymore. This was real. This was a life at stake. His eyes locked onto the woman's, and he saw it. Desperation, a silent plea for help. The air seemed to grow heavier around him as he considered his options. 7 of the tribal aliens stood around the fire, each armed with primitive weapons, a variety of spears and knives made from bone and stone, tools more suited to a hunter than a diplomat. The odds were against him. In a straight fight, he might win. But the woman? She would suffer in the process. A thought flashed across his mind: his ship. The medical supplies. He had vaccines, antibiotics, valuable commodities for a frontier world like Naram. Medicine that could save these aliens from disease, perhaps even prevent a catastrophic outbreak if they knew how to use it. Could he trade it? Could he save her without risking too much? The decision was made. Jonathan stood up slowly, his presence betraying nothing but calm determination. The tribal aliens turned toward him, their eyes narrowing. Weapons raised in a threatening manner. Their leader, one of the tallest of the group, with 4 glistening black eyes, took a step forward, clicking its mandibles, eyes studying him carefully. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jonathan could feel his heart rate quicken, but he kept his hands raised, showing he meant no harm. "I come in peace," Jonathan said, his voice calm but firm, raising one hand in a gesture of goodwill, though his vibro machete remained visible at his side. He knew how to fight, but this wasn't a fight he wanted. Not yet. "I offer medicine. You need it." He gestured toward the woman, his eyes locked with hers, is not food. She is a person. The leader of the tribe clicked its mandibles again, communicating with the others in a language Jonathan could not comprehend. A series of sharp, rapid clicks and whistling sounds filled the air, creating an eerie rhythm. The alien leader stepped forward, its four eyes blinking in rapid succession as it seemed to analyze Jonathan's offer. Jonathan's breath slowed as he reached into his pack, carefully removing a small case containing medical supplies. He held it out, showing them the contents, various vials of vaccines, the hope for a future of peace between their species, a trade Jonathan hoped they would understand. Medicine, he said slowly, gesturing to the pack. Powerful medicine. You take it. I take her. The leader paused, studying him intently. After what seemed like an eternity, it gave a sharp gesture to its companions, who moved to release the woman from the spit. Jonathan held his breath, waiting, his muscles coiled in anticipation, ready to move. And then, the woman, her amber eyes flickering with a mix of disbelief and gratitude, was freed. Her frail body crumpled to the ground as she fell into Jonathan's arms. She was lighter than he expected, her skin cool and smooth to the touch, her body trembling against his chest. He felt her warmth seep into him as he gently cradled her, a sense of protectiveness rising from within him. The tribal leader examined the medical supplies one last time before giving a dismissive motion, as if confirming that the trade was completed. Jonathan nodded, backing away slowly, his grip tightening around the woman as he began to retreat into the jungle. "You're safe now," he whispered to her, his voice gentle but filled with conviction. The jungle felt quieter now, almost eerily so. The air around them seemed to shift, as if the planet itself had acknowledged their departure. "My name is Jonathan Vega," he continued, looking down at her, hoping she understood. "From Earth." She blinked slowly, then whispered, her voice melodic and soft, with a clear, alien lilting accent, "Thank you, Jonathan Vega, from Earth. I am Vera Kix of Astralis. I owe you my life." Jonathan adjusted his grip on her, glancing over his shoulder. The clearing was now behind them, and the jungle seemed to open up before them. There was no turning back now. They had a long way to go. And whatever lay ahead, he knew this mission would never be the same. The clearing emerged from the jungle like a secluded arena, an untouched space carved from the dense, almost sentient mass of the alien flora. Jonathan crept forward, his breath steady but quickening with each passing step. The thick air, dense with moisture and the smell of decaying plant matter, wrapped around him like a living entity. His boots sank into the damp ground, the sound muffled by the low hum of insects that swirled in the humid atmosphere. Sunlight filtered weakly through the jungle canopy, casting mottled shadows on the soft earth. The brightness of the clearing struck Jonathan as he stepped into it, the light dappling across his face, momentarily blinding him. It was eerily quiet except for the occasional rustle of distant wildlife. His senses sharpened, attuned to the quiet danger that pervaded the space. As his eyes adjusted to the light, Jonathan's gaze fell upon the central scene, a group of creatures surrounding a crackling fire. They were like something out of an ancient myth, their forms tall and gangly, their limbs thin and long, reminiscent of skeletal trees with sinewy branches. Their skin, a strange blend of shifting green and brown, rippled and blended with the surrounding foliage. They appeared to melt into their environment, each scale and patch of skin changing hues like a living camouflage, a living weapon forged by the very jungle that embraced them. The creatures, aliens, he realized, stood tall, perhaps 7 feet, with elongated bodies that gave them an almost otherworldly grace. Their heads were triangular in shape, crowned with thin, sharp ridges that jutted from their skulls like alien spines. But what struck Jonathan the most were their eyes. For dark, glassy eyes shimmered with an unblinking intensity, their depths gleaming with an intelligence that felt both ancient and primal. They communicated in a series of clicks and guttural chittering sounds, a language that was incomprehensible, though it carried an undeniable sense of authority. Jonathan remained still, hidden behind a towering fern-like plant that had leaves the size of a human's arm span. He squatted low, his body pressed against the moist earth, watching through the dense foliage. His hand instinctively gripped the vibro machete at his side, its familiar weight bringing him a sense of calm in the face of uncertainty. But he knew this wasn't just another recon mission, this was something far darker, far more dangerous. The fire at the center of the clearing flickered with orange and red hues, casting long, jagged shadows across the group. The tribal aliens, despite their alien forms, had an unsettling familiarity to them. They were hunting, he realized. They were preparing something. His eyes locked onto the figure in the center of the ritual. Suspended above the fire was a humanoid figure, female, delicate in build, her body bound tightly to a crude, jagged spit. She was turned slowly over the flames, her body rotating with the steady rhythm of the fire, like some twisted, nightmarish sacrifice. Her skin was a striking lavender, pale against the surrounding darkness, the color like a soft, bruised twilight that should not belong to any living thing. Her body was lean but muscular, the silver flight suit she wore torn and burned in places, showing the pale, smooth skin beneath. The flight suit, though it looked out of place among the primitive aliens, was unmistakable. It was high-tech, something meant for an explorer or a diplomat. But the suit had been ravaged by the harsh environment. Pieces of the fabric hung off her like rags, burnt and frayed. Jonathan's heart skipped a beat when he noticed her long, straight silver hair cascading down in waves, almost glowing in the firelight. It hung dangerously close to the flames, the heat causing the tips of the hair to flicker and curl like an ethereal extension of the fire itself. But it wasn't just her physicality that caught Jonathan's attention, it was her eyes. When she twisted her head slowly, looking for an escape, her large, almond-shaped eyes locked onto his. Her eyes were a shade of amber that seemed unnatural in their intensity. They shone in the firelight, wide with a mixture of fear, desperation, and something else. Something familiar. Hope. A pang of recognition cut through Jonathan's chest. Her gaze met his with such intensity, as if she knew he had already made a choice. God, Jonathan breathed under his breath, clenching his teeth. His hand tightened around the machete's hilt, the polished surface now slick with his sweat. His instincts screamed at him he couldn't just stand by. He couldn't turn back. Despite the primal part of his brain telling him to retreat, to continue his survey, to keep his distance, Jonathan could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. This was no longer just a mission. This was a person. A life. A choice that would define him in ways he wasn't prepared to face. The tribal aliens around the fire had not yet noticed him, too absorbed in their ritualistic dance. Their movements were slow and deliberate, each step in sync with the flickering flames. Some of the creatures gripped large, jagged spears, primitive weapons that seemed out of place for such a dangerous group, but Jonathan knew better. These creatures were not to be underestimated. They had the cunning of predators, the viciousness of hunters, and the coordination of a pack. He took a slow, steady breath, pushing down the panic that crept up his spine. He had been trained to make quick decisions in the heat of battle, to act when others hesitated. Now, however, there was no room for hesitation. Every second that passed made the woman's fate more uncertain. The longer he waited, the more likely the aliens would realize he was there and retaliate. Jonathan knew he had two choices: either wait, stay hidden, and continue his survey, or take a risk that could cost him everything. But then he saw her again, her eyes wide and pleading. Her body, weakened and exhausted, strained against the ropes that held her in place. The heat from the flames rippled across her lavender skin, making her look fragile and vulnerable. She was a warrior in her own right, but this was a ritual of terror, a twisted celebration of pain and suffering. The scream he had heard earlier, the one that had driven him to this place, echoed again in his mind, but this time it was clearer, more urgent. She wasn't just in pain. She was fighting for survival. And he could do something about it. He wasn't here by accident. This wasn't some random alien world, this was a moment of destiny. Jonathan's hand went to the side of his neck, where the communications device he had used earlier now lay silent. He could return to his ship, the Nomad, and continue his mission, but he knew he couldn't live with himself if he did. Taking a deep breath, he moved closer, his footsteps deliberate, each step taken with careful precision. His fingers flexed, and he loosened his grip on the machete, knowing that combat wasn't the answer, not yet. He needed to think this through. He needed to trade. He needed to make them see. The woman Vera, he realized, was still locked onto him with that same intensity. Her amber eyes had a spark of recognition. They weren't asking for help, they were daring him to help. Her face twisted in pain, but there was no defeat there. She was waiting. Waiting for him to act. Waiting for him to decide whether to risk his life or walk away. Jonathan's resolve hardened. He had no intention of walking away. The clearing felt oppressive as Jonathan stepped forward, each of his movements calculated, deliberate. He felt the weight of the eyes of the tribal aliens on him, their strange, shifting bodies a blur in the heat of the firelight. His heart thudded in his chest, but he forced his breathing to steady. The air was thick, the kind of thickness that pressed against your skin, making every movement feel heavier than it was. The fire flickered in the center, its dancing flames sending shadows that seemed to twist and reach, the heat from it a physical force against his face. Jonathan's eyes remained fixed on the creature standing at the center of the tribe, a towering, imposing figure with four eyes that gleamed under the light of the fire. The alien leader was even more terrifying up close. Its skin shimmered like bark, textured and rough, its tall, wiry body pulsing with an eerie energy, almost as though it were part of the very jungle itself. Jonathan's gaze held steady, never wavering, despite the silent, deadly threat the alien posed. He had dealt with countless dangerous species before, but this was different. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a fight for survival, for someone else's life. The leader's eyes blinked rapidly in quick succession, its eyes shifting from Jonathan's face to the small case of medical supplies that he held out, and then back to his face. The weight of the moment pressed down on Jonathan as he held his breath, feeling the eyes of the alien tribe shift toward him with suspicion, curiosity, and hunger. There was no room for error. In his hand, the medical case was a small, seemingly insignificant object, nothing more than a standard case of interstellar medicine. Yet it held the power to change everything. The vials of antibiotics, vaccines, and antiseptics were highly valued in frontier worlds like Naram, where sickness could spread rapidly due to a lack of advanced medical care. It wasn't just medicine, it was hope. A future. A potential alliance, or perhaps, in this case, a ransom for a life. His gaze shifted to Vera, her body still bound to the crude spit, her skin glowing with sweat, an unnatural sheen against the flickering fire. Her hair long, straight, and silvery was still caught in the edges of the flame, the strands curling and burning like fragile threads. Every shift of the fire caused her body to lurch slightly, her arms and legs pulling against their bonds. She was fragile, her chest rising and falling rapidly, each breath strained. Her life was in the hands of these aliens, and Jonathan knew it would be no easy task to secure her freedom. With a deep, steadying breath, Jonathan lifted his hands open, palms outward in a gesture of peace. It was the universal symbol of non-aggression, a signal that he meant no harm. His other hand still gripped the medical case tightly, his knuckles white against the plastic casing. He could feel the hum of the vibro machete at his side, but he had no intention of drawing it. Not yet. His eyes flicked back to the alien leader, whose expression remained inscrutable. "I come in peace," Jonathan said slowly, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. His words were simple, straightforward. His throat felt tight, as if the air itself were trying to constrict around him. He needed them to understand. He needed them to see the value in what he was offering. He wasn't just some wandering interloper, not some lone human to be dismissed. He was offering salvation, something the tribe had never seen before, a lifeline. "I offer medicine," he continued, raising the case slightly, allowing the alien leader to see the contents inside. "Powerful medicine. You take it, I take her." His voice hung in the air for a moment, the silence settling heavily between them. The chittering sounds of the tribe had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness that made Jonathan's skin crawl. The only sound now was the crackling of the fire and the occasional, soft shuffle of feet on the damp earth. The leader of the tribe stared at the medical supplies, its four eyes blinking in rapid succession, each eye reflecting the flames like mirrors. Jonathan's muscles were taut with tension. His whole body screamed for him to act, to take the machete in hand and cut through the tribe's defenses. But that wasn't the answer. He had to be smart. He had to be patient. This was a moment of negotiation, not violence. The right words, the right gesture, could change everything. The wrong move, however, could lead to disaster. His mind raced, analyzing the situation, calculating every possible outcome. Finally, the leader made a low, guttural noise, one that resonated deep in Jonathan's chest. The sound was not one of approval, nor was it one of rejection. It was something else, something ancient, something primal. The alien leader shifted slightly, the muscles in its body rippling as if it were considering Jonathan's offer with the full weight of its species' instincts. Its eyes flicked back to the woman on the spit, then to the medical case in Jonathan's hands, and then back to his face. For a long, excruciating moment, there was no movement. Jonathan stood frozen, his muscles tight, his breath shallow. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, the oppressive heat of the fire clinging to him, suffocating him. Time seemed to stretch endlessly in the stillness. Then, the alien leader finally moved. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it raised one of its long, gangly arms and made a sharp gesture toward the others. The movement was fluid, efficient, and unmistakable signal to the rest of the tribe. Two of the creatures broke from the group, their limbs stretching unnaturally long as they advanced toward the spit. They reached out with long, clawed hands, and without hesitation, they began to pull the woman's body from the fire. Vera's body jerked, her arms and legs pulling weakly against the restraints. The heat from the flames seemed to have drained the strength from her, but the rough hands of the aliens were too much. One of them roughly sliced through the bonds with a sharp, stone blade, cutting the ropes that held her in place. As soon as the bonds were severed, Vera collapsed into the arms of the alien, her body too weak to support itself. Jonathan's heart clenched as he watched the alien handle her carelessly, dragging her limp form across the dirt toward him. His instincts flared again. He could feel the urge to rush forward, to tear Vera from their hands, but he held himself back. This was the moment of exchange. He couldn't lose control now. The alien leader's voice broke through the silence once more, a low, clicking sound that was unmistakably a signal of approval. Jonathan took a careful step forward, his eyes never leaving Vera's fragile form. She was breathing, but weakly, her body trembling in the alien's grasp. Jonathan's gaze flickered to the medical case in his hand. This was at the moment of exchange. The tribe had taken the offer. Now, it was his turn to complete the transaction. He slowly set the medical case down on the ground, carefully sliding it toward the alien leader. "All of it," he said firmly, his voice steady. "All of it for her life." For a moment, there was no response. The alien leader lowered its eyes to the case, its hands hovering over it with strange reverence. The firelight cast odd shadows across the leader's face, making its four eyes glimmer in the darkness like the eyes of a creature from some ancient myth. Jonathan didn't know what the alien was thinking, but he knew what he had to do. He had to hope. The leader finally reached down, its long, clawed fingers delicately touching the case. The air seemed to pulse around them, thick with tension. Slowly, as if savoring the moment, the alien leader nodded once, sharply. A sound that might have been a low growl escaped from its throat. With that simple motion, the trade was made. The alien leader gestured again, this time signaling to the rest of the tribe. The two aliens who had pulled Vera from the spit stepped aside, allowing Jonathan to approach. He moved quickly, reaching out for her before the aliens had a chance to pull away. The moment his hands touched her body, Vera stirred weakly, her amber eyes fluttering open for just a moment. Her gaze locked with his, and Jonathan felt a deep, inexplicable connection. She was alive. And she was his responsibility now. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms, supporting her delicate form against his chest. Her body felt so light, almost fragile, like something that could be shattered by the slightest movement. He could feel the heat of the fire on his skin, but it was nothing compared to the heat that now pulsed between him and Vera. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but it was enough. The words, simple and sincere, made his heart skip a beat. Jonathan turned toward the jungle, his gaze sweeping over the tribe one last time. The deal was done. He had saved her, but now he had to get them both to safety. The jungle had never felt more threatening than it did now, and the shadows around him seemed to grow longer, more menacing with every step he took. As Jonathan retreated into the thick foliage, the tribe watched silently, their eyes following him as he carried Vera away. The fire crackled behind him, casting flickering lights on the darkened trees. The tension was far from over, but for now, he had made it. The exchange had been made. The clearing felt oppressive as Jonathan stepped forward, each of his movements calculated, deliberate. He felt the weight of the eyes of the tribal aliens on him, their strange, shifting bodies a blur in the heat of the firelight. His heart thudded in his chest, but he forced his breathing to steady. The air was thick, the kind of thickness that pressed against your skin, making every movement feel heavier than it was. The fire flickered in the center, its dancing flames sending shadows that seemed to twist and reach, the heat from it a physical force against his face. Jonathan's eyes remained fixed on the creature standing at the center of the tribe, a towering, imposing figure with four eyes that gleamed under the light of the fire. The alien leader was even more terrifying up close. Its skin shimmered like bark, textured and rough, its tall, wiry body pulsing with an eerie energy, almost as though it were part of the very jungle itself. Jonathan's gaze held steady, never wavering, despite the silent, deadly threat the alien posed. He had dealt with countless dangerous species before, but this was different. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a fight for survival, for someone else's life. The leader's eyes blinked rapidly in quick succession, its eyes shifting from Jonathan's face to the small case of medical supplies that he held out, and then back to his face. The weight of the moment pressed down on Jonathan as he held his breath, feeling the eyes of the alien tribe shift toward him with suspicion, curiosity, and hunger. There was no room for error. In his hand, the medical case was a small, seemingly insignificant object, nothing more than a standard case of interstellar medicine. Yet it held the power to change everything. The vials of antibiotics, vaccines, and antiseptics were highly valued in frontier worlds like Naram, where sickness could spread rapidly due to a lack of advanced medical care. It wasn't just medicine, it was hope. A future. A potential alliance, or perhaps, in this case, a ransom for a life. His gaze shifted to Vera, her body still bound to the crude spit, her skin glowing with sweat, an unnatural sheen against the flickering fire. Her hair long, straight, and silvery was still caught in the edges of the flame, the strands curling and burning like fragile threads. Every shift of the fire caused her body to lurch slightly, her arms and legs pulling against their bonds. She was fragile, her chest rising and falling rapidly, each breath strained. Her life was in the hands of these aliens, and Jonathan knew it would be no easy task to secure her freedom. With a deep, steadying breath, Jonathan lifted his hands open, palms outward in a gesture of peace. It was the universal symbol of non-aggression, a signal that he meant no harm. His other hand still gripped the medical case tightly, his knuckles white against the plastic casing. He could feel the hum of the vibro machete at his side, but he had no intention of drawing it. Not yet. His eyes flicked back to the alien leader, whose expression remained inscrutable. "I come in peace," Jonathan said slowly, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of urgency. His words were simple, straightforward. His throat felt tight, as if the air itself were trying to constrict around him. He needed them to understand. He needed them to see the value in what he was offering. He wasn't just some wandering interloper, not some lone human to be dismissed. He was offering salvation, something the tribe had never seen before, a lifeline. "I offer medicine," he continued, raising the case slightly, allowing the alien leader to see the contents inside. "Powerful medicine. You take it, I take her." His voice hung in the air for a moment, the silence settling heavily between them. The chittering sounds of the tribe had stopped, replaced by an eerie stillness that made Jonathan's skin crawl. The only sound now was the crackling of the fire and the occasional, soft shuffle of feet on the damp earth. The leader of the tribe stared at the medical supplies, its four eyes blinking in rapid succession, each eye reflecting the flames like mirrors. Jonathan's muscles were taut with tension. His whole body screamed for him to act, to take the machete in hand and cut through the tribe's defenses. But that wasn't the answer. He had to be smart. He had to be patient. This was a moment of negotiation, not violence. The right words, the right gesture, could change everything. The wrong move, however, could lead to disaster. His mind raced, analyzing the situation, calculating every possible outcome. Finally, the leader made a low, guttural noise, one that resonated deep in Jonathan's chest. The sound was not one of approval, nor was it one of rejection. It was something else, something ancient, something primal. The alien leader shifted slightly, the muscles in its body rippling as if it were considering Jonathan's offer with the full weight of its species' instincts. Its eyes flicked back to the woman on the spit, then to the medical case in Jonathan's hands, and then back to his face. For a long, excruciating moment, there was no movement. Jonathan stood frozen, his muscles tight, his breath shallow. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back, the oppressive heat of the fire clinging to him, suffocating him. Time seemed to stretch endlessly in the stillness. Then, the alien leader finally moved. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it raised one of its long, gangly arms and made a sharp gesture toward the others. The movement was fluid, efficient and unmistakable signal to the rest of the tribe. Two of the creatures broke from the group, their limbs stretching unnaturally long as they advanced toward the spit. They reached out with long, clawed hands, and without hesitation, they began to pull the woman's body from the fire. Vera's body jerked, her arms and legs pulling weakly against the restraints. The heat from the flames seemed to have drained the strength from her, but the rough hands of the aliens were too much. One of them roughly sliced through the bonds with a sharp, stone blade, cutting the ropes that held her in place. As soon as the bonds were severed, Vera collapsed into the arms of the alien, her body too weak to support itself. Jonathan's heart clenched as he watched the alien handle her carelessly, dragging her limp form across the dirt toward him. His instincts flared again. He could feel the urge to rush forward, to tear Vera from their hands, but he held himself back. This was the moment of exchange. He couldn't lose control now. The alien leader's voice broke through the silence once more, a low, clicking sound that was unmistakably a signal of approval. Jonathan took a careful step forward, his eyes never leaving Vera's fragile form. She was breathing, but weakly, her body trembling in the alien's grasp. Jonathan's gaze flickered to the medical case in his hand. This was at the moment of exchange. The tribe had taken the offer. Now, it was his turn to complete the transaction. He slowly set the medical case down on the ground, carefully sliding it toward the alien leader. "All of it," he said firmly, his voice steady. "All of it for her life." For a moment, there was no response. The alien leader lowered its eyes to the case, its hands hovering over it with strange reverence. The firelight cast odd shadows across the leader's face, making its four eyes glimmer in the darkness like the eyes of a creature from some ancient myth. Jonathan didn't know what the alien was thinking. But he knew what he had to do. He had to hope. The leader finally reached down, its long, clawed fingers delicately touching the case. The air seemed to pulse around them, thick with tension. Slowly, as if savoring the moment, the alien leader nodded once, sharply. A sound that might have been a low growl escaped from its throat. With that simple motion, the trade was made. The alien leader gestured again, this time signaling to the rest of the tribe. The two aliens who had pulled Vera from the spit stepped aside, allowing Jonathan to approach. He moved quickly, reaching out for her before the aliens had a chance to pull away. The moment his hands touched her body, Vera stirred weakly, her amber eyes fluttering open for just a moment. Her gaze locked with his, and Jonathan felt a deep, inexplicable connection. She was alive. And she was his responsibility now. Carefully, he lifted her into his arms, supporting her delicate form against his chest. Her body felt so light, almost fragile, like something that could be shattered by the slightest movement. He could feel the heat of the fire on his skin, but it was nothing compared to the heat that now pulsed between him and Vera. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but it was enough. The words, simple and sincere, made his heart skip a beat. Jonathan turned toward the jungle, his gaze sweeping over the tribe one last time. The deal was done. He had saved her, but now he had to get them both to safety. The jungle had never felt more threatening than it did now, and the shadows around him seemed to grow longer, more menacing with every step he took. As Jonathan retreated into the thick foliage, the tribe watched silently, their eyes following him as he carried Vera away. The fire crackled behind him, casting flickering lights on the darkened trees. The tension was far from over, but for now, he had made it. The exchange had been made. The jungle around them seemed to close in, its dense vegetation pushing against Jonathan's limbs as he carefully maneuvered through the underbrush. Every step was met with resistance, the alien vines and twisted roots pulling at his legs, as if the jungle itself was reluctant to let them pass. The air was thick with humidity, a damp, earthy smell filling Jonathan's nostrils. The distant calls of strange creatures echoed from deep within the foliage, their shrill cries cutting through the stillness, creating an eerie soundtrack to their perilous trek. Sweat trickled down his forehead, stinging his eyes, as the oppressive heat seemed to press down on him from all sides. Vera, cradled gently in his arms, felt light but fragile. Her lavender skin glowed faintly in the low light, a stark contrast against the deep green shadows that surrounded them. Her breathing, shallow and labored, was the only sound that accompanied their footsteps, save for the soft rustling of the plants as they pushed their way through the thick foliage. She was still too weak to walk, her legs trembling from the ordeal she had just endured. Jonathan's arms were growing tired from holding her, but he pushed the fatigue aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. He adjusted his grip, shifting her slightly to ease the strain on his body. Her head rested against his shoulder, and her silver hair, now freed from the fiery spit, cascaded down her back, shimmering like threads of moonlight. Her body was warm against his chest, a warmth that contrasted with the chill of the jungle air. Despite the immediate danger they were in, Jonathan found himself oddly comforted by her presence. There was something about her, something that went beyond gratitude. Her mere proximity made the jungle feel less threatening, as though the unknown dangers were less daunting when she was near. As they moved, Jonathan tried to keep a steady pace, his military instincts taking over. Every rustle in the undergrowth, every snap of a branch underfoot, was met with immediate attention. His eyes darted to the shadows, scanning for any movement that could signal danger. But the jungle, despite its apparent stillness, felt alive. Almost too alive. The trees loomed over them like ancient guardians, their thick trunks twisted and gnarled, roots weaving into the earth like giant serpents. The leaves overhead were impossibly large, their dark green surfaces glistening with dew, while vines hung like ropes from the branches above. The jungle's canopy was so dense that only small shafts of light pierced through, casting strange, shifting patterns across the ground. It was as though the very jungle was alive, watching them, listening to their every move. And yet, despite the overwhelming feeling of being surrounded, the two of them seemed utterly alone in this vast expanse of alien wilderness. Jonathan could feel Vera's eyes on him, though he couldn't see them. He knew she was awake. He could sense the tension in her body as she shifted slightly in his arms. She was undoubtedly confused, but Jonathan was beginning to realize that their survival depended on more than just getting back to the ship. It depended on trust. His thoughts lingered on the strange, unspoken bond that had begun to form between them, a bond born from their brief encounter, but one that felt undeniably deep. It was as though they were connected by something greater than chance, something that transcended the immediate circumstances. "So, you're from Australis?" Jonathan's voice cut through the stillness, a soft but steady question that broke the silence between them. His words felt strange in the thick air, but he needed to break the tension, to know more about this mysterious woman who had so suddenly entered his life. "I'm Jonathan Vega. I'm from Earth. I never thought I'd meet anyone from Australis out here in the middle of nowhere." Vera's voice, when it came, was soft, tinged with exhaustion but still clear. Astralis, she murmured the name as though tasting it, almost in disbelief. She shifted against him, her breath warm on his neck. Yes. Astralis. It's a system on the outer rim of the galaxy, part of the alliance of stars. We've been mapping this sector for potential trade routes, diplomatic relations, and exploration. I wasn't supposed to end up like this. Her words were slow and strained, as though the effort of speaking was too much, but Jonathan could hear the weight behind them. Her voice held a subtle, melodic lilt, foreign yet familiar. There was something in the way she spoke that suggested wisdom beyond her years, and Jonathan could tell that her story was far from simple. I was part of a diplomatic mission, she continued, her voice growing more somber. We were trying to make contact with the Krell. My team had established communication with them. They seemed receptive at first. But something changed. The Krell attacked us without warning. She paused, her breath catching in her throat, and Jonathan could feel her body stiffen in his arms. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were supposed to be the ones to make peace, to connect the stars. But instead, we were hunted like animals. Jonathan's mind raced as he processed her words. The Krell. He had heard rumors, whispers of their brutality and savagery. They were a hostile species, known for their violence and territorial nature. But hearing it from Vera, seeing the pain in her eyes, made it real. The mission she had been on had turned into a nightmare, a mission that had ended not in peaceful diplomacy, but in bloodshed and betrayal. They sabotaged our ship, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Tore through our defenses. We tried to flee, but they captured us. I managed to escape, but they left me to die here, in this jungle. I don't know how long I've been here, but it doesn't matter. The Krell are still out there. The gravity of her words hit Jonathan like a hammer. The Krell. This was bigger than just a resource survey. He had unknowingly stepped into a conflict far beyond his understanding. What had started as a simple mission had turned into something far darker, something far more dangerous. His thoughts flickered to the Nomad, parked just a few kilometers away. Was it safe? Would they even make it there in time? The jungle seemed to grow darker as they continued forward, and Jonathan's eyes constantly darted between the shadows, scanning the dense foliage for any signs of movement. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he instinctively gripped Vera tighter, as though her presence might shield him from the threat that loomed in the distance. As they neared the clearing where his ship was parked, Jonathan felt a slight sense of relief. The ship, the Nomad, stood quietly in the distance, its matte gray hull blending with the rocks around it. Despite its small size, it was a solid ship, fast and reliable, built for exploration rather than combat. He had modified it to be as stealthy as possible, but even so, he knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Krell were relentless, and they wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. He paused, taking a long look around, his instincts on high alert. The path to the Nomad was clear, but the air felt thick, heavy with the potential for danger. His thoughts flickered to Vera's past with the Krell, and he realized that their survival hinged not just on reaching the ship but on understanding the danger that still pursued them. Whatever happened next, they had to be ready for it. Stay close, Jonathan muttered, his voice a low growl as he adjusted Vera's weight in his arms. We're not out of the woods yet. The Krell, if they're still hunting you, we have to stay ahead of them. Vera nodded weakly, her eyes scanning the jungle with a quiet wariness that matched his own. Her amber eyes gleamed with something deeper now, fear, certainly, but also determination. She wasn't just a victim in this story, she was a survivor, just like him. With Vera in his arms, Jonathan began the final trek toward the safety of the Nomad. The jungle, once a place of mystery and danger, now seemed like a predator in waiting, its very silence screaming for attention. Jonathan's every sense was heightened, and he knew that with each passing moment, the danger of the Krell grew closer. They weren't alone anymore. But as the shadows stretched around them, Jonathan knew one thing for certain: their escape was just the beginning of something much larger than either of them had anticipated. The quiet hum of the Nomad was a welcome relief after the suffocating silence of the jungle. As Jonathan stepped into the ship's cramped, utilitarian interior, the low pulse of the ship's system's dimming lights, subtle vibrations, and the soft hiss of air recyclers settled his nerves. The faint, sterile scent of recycled air mixed with the faint aroma of metal and leather, grounding him in the familiar environment. Yet, even here, with the ship's steel walls surrounding them, Jonathan felt the weight of the outside world pressing in. He carried Vera carefully into the ship's main cabin, the soft hum of the engines growing louder as they crossed the threshold. The interior was compact but efficiently designed, with modular systems to conserve space. The cockpit served as both living area and command center, while a small medical alcove, no larger than a broom closet, sat nestled to the side. It was in this alcove that Jonathan intended to treat Vera, a place where they could momentarily forget the chaos they had left behind. The medical supplies he had brought with him were stored neatly in a compartment overhead, and as he set Vera down on the cot, he moved quickly to retrieve them. The small space was cluttered with various tools, first aid kits, bandages, medical scans, and diagnostic devices, all essential for surviving on the frontier worlds. In the dim light, the blue glow of the medical scanner pulsed softly, casting an eerie shadow over the walls. Jonathan's hands moved with practiced ease as he prepared the supplies, his mind still racing with the events of the past few hours. Vera's breathing was shallow, her body weak from both physical and emotional exhaustion. She had been through so much, and now it was Jonathan's turn to ensure she didn't suffer further. He sat down beside her on the cot, careful not to make her more uncomfortable than she already was. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words that neither of them seemed ready to say. With delicate hands, Jonathan began to clean and dress the burns and scratches on Vera's arms, the antiseptic gel cooling her inflamed skin. She winced slightly as he worked, but she didn't pull away, her amber eyes flickering up to meet his occasionally. There was something haunting in her gaze, something that spoke of deep trauma, of a past she wasn't sure how to share, but would have to eventually. "I'm sorry," Jonathan said, breaking the silence. His voice was soft but steady, as he applied a burn gel to a particularly nasty wound on her wrist. "I didn't expect any of this. I thought I was just here for a resource survey, nothing more." Vera's lips trembled slightly as she glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Her silver hair fell around her face like a curtain, shimmering faintly under the ship's artificial lights. "You're not the first to think that, Jonathan," she murmured, her voice hoarse. "We all thought we were just here to explore, to build bridges. But the truth is, this sector, it's a powder keg, waiting for a spark. And I've been part of the spark." Jonathan's hands paused, hovering just above her skin as her words sank in. He wanted to ask her more, but there was something in her voice, something in the way she said, "I've been part of the spark," that made him wary. She was more than just a diplomat now. She was part of something much larger, something that stretched far beyond what he could understand. "What happened with the Krell?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You said they attacked your team. Why? What changed?" Vera closed her eyes, as though bracing herself for the weight of the memories. The subtle tension in her shoulders seemed to increase as she recounted the events. We had been in contact with the Krell for months, she began, her voice quiet but steady. At first, they were receptive. They had their own agenda, of course, but we made progress. We shared knowledge about our worlds, our cultures. Everything seemed like it could work. But then, something shifted. They grew hostile without warning. We couldn't understand why. They attacked us in a blind fury, tore our ship apart, and scattered us. The ship's engines were sabotaged, cut off from our fleet. The Krell have advanced technology, but it's their brutal nature that makes them so dangerous. Jonathan's mind raced as he listened. Sabotage. That word had a bitter taste. You said the ship was sabotaged. Do you think they had inside help? Vera nodded slowly. It's possible. The Krell are primitive in some ways, but they've been able to reverse engineer technology, especially after they encountered our exploratory ships. But what makes this even more complicated is that we've been having issues with some of our own people, those who oppose the idea of peaceful relations with Earth and the other species of this sector. Jonathan leaned back slightly, his brow furrowed in confusion. What do you mean? Your people are supposed to be diplomatic, right? Why would they sabotage the mission? Vera's gaze darkened. You're not familiar with the Proxima incident, are you? She tilted her head slightly, as though sizing him up. It was a disaster. A diplomatic catastrophe. Jonathan's expression shifted as the name registered in his mind. He had heard whispers about Proxima, a political nightmare between Astralis and Earth that almost spiraled into interstellar war. A mining operation on Proxima had accidentally destroyed a sacred monument of the Astralians, an act that had been seen as cultural sacrilege. Relations between the two worlds had been strained ever since. I've heard of it, Jonathan said slowly. It was a misunderstanding, wasn't it? A mistake. Vera sighed, her breath ragged, as though the weight of the truth had settled heavily on her chest. That's what they want you to believe. But it wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate act of sabotage. Someone on Earth made a decision to destroy that monument, and they blamed it on us. The diplomatic fallout was immense. Since then, there have been factions within Astralis who want to isolate themselves, to sever ties with Earth, believing that humans are too unpredictable, too dangerous. Jonathan processed her words, the gravity of the situation settling in his stomach like a stone. He had volunteered for this mission to survey resources, but now he found himself tangled in a web of political intrigue and interstellar conflict. This was no longer just a mission for credits, it was a fight for survival, and for something more profound. I didn't know, Jonathan muttered. I didn't know it was this complicated. I thought we were just looking for resources. But this is bigger than I ever imagined. Vera nodded, a sad smile touching her lips. Most people don't. They think it's just about minerals, or trade routes. But it's about power, Jonathan. It's about who gets to decide the future of this sector. And right now, both Astralis and Earth are standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, and everything could crumble. As the silence settled between them, the ship's communications system flickered to life with an unexpected urgency. The soft beep of the incoming distress signal broke through the quiet of the cabin, an ominous sound that seemed to vibrate through the hull. Jonathan's hand immediately went to the console, his brow furrowing as he glanced at the frequency. Australian frequency, he murmured, his voice tinged with confusion. This can't be good. The voice that crackled through the static was strained, desperate. This is the Celestial Envoy, a diplomatic vessel under attack. We are located near the Taurus Nebula. We require immediate assistance, please. anyone, respond. Vera's face went pale as she sat up abruptly, her eyes wide with alarm. That's a diplomatic vessel, she said, her voice trembling. They're under attack. This can't be happening. Jonathan turned to face her, his expression hardening. You know them. I don't know, Vera replied, her voice shaking. But if they're being attacked, we have to help. The Krell don't stop at anything. If they've taken down the celestial envoy. I know, Jonathan interrupted, his voice low but resolute. We're going. We have to help. I don't care what the risks are. The silence in the room hung thick, the weight of their decision sinking in. Jonathan's fingers flew over the ship's controls, setting a course for the Taurus Nebula. He had no idea what awaited them, but he couldn't ignore a distress call. Not when it came from his own people. Not when there was a chance to make a difference. I'll need you to get ready, Jonathan said, his voice firm. We might be in for a fight, Vera. Vera looked at him, her amber eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I'll be ready, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing within her. Let's just hope we're not too late. The hum of the engines grew louder as the ship adjusted its course, the stars ahead blurring into streaks of light. The journey to the Taurus Nebula was about to begin, and Jonathan knew that the road ahead would be far more dangerous than he had ever anticipated. But it was too late to turn back now. The hum of the Nomad was steady as Jonathan steered the ship through the deep, ink-black void of space. The stars outside blinked like distant fires, their faint glimmer casting a soft light against the vast emptiness of the cosmos. Vera sat quietly beside him, her posture tense but composed. Her amber eyes were fixed on the view screen, watching as the distant stars blurred into streaks of light, a testament to the ship's speed. Despite the urgency of their mission to the Taurus Nebula, there was a palpable sense of calm in the air and illusion of safety as they sped away from Naram. The ship had been designed for exploration, not combat. Its matte gray hull blended seamlessly into rocky environments, but here, in the depths of space, there was nothing to hide behind. The Nomad was vulnerable, a small vessel with few defenses and a crew that, until now, had been relatively inexperienced in the dangers of interstellar warfare. Jonathan's mind was still processing the events unfolding. Vera's revelation of the Krell, the complex politics between Earth and Astralis, and now, a potential diplomatic disaster looming in the stars. His hand hovered over the controls as he plotted their course to the Taurus Nebula. But as he adjusted the trajectory, something strange began to happen. A faint ripple in the sensors caught Jonathan's attention. It was almost imperceptible at first, just a faint distortion in the surrounding gravitational fields. He frowned, bringing up the scanner display on the console. The readings were off, more than just a slight fluctuation, there was something pulling them. Something big. Vera, Jonathan said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension in the cockpit. We've got a problem. Vera's eyes darted to the console, her expression darkening. What is it? Jonathan's fingers danced across the controls, adjusting the ship's course, trying to correct their path. We're being pulled off course. There's some kind of gravitational distortion ahead. It's like a tractor beam, but I don't see any ship or station on my scans. Vera's face tightened, her features becoming unreadable. A tractor beam? Are you sure? It's not possible that we're... Her voice trailed off as the ship began to shudder, a subtle vibration running through the hull. Jonathan cursed under his breath as the ship's trajectory shifted again, this time more violently, pulling them toward a mass of asteroids that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The distant stars that had once been a comforting sight now seemed to swirl in chaotic patterns, the gravitational pull intensifying. Jonathan fought with the controls, desperately trying to stabilize the ship, but the pull was too strong. "It's coming from that asteroid belt," Jonathan muttered, his eyes scanning the view screen. The belt was vast, a swirling mass of rocks, some the size of small moons, others no larger than pebbles. They were heading straight into it, and the massive chunks of debris blocked any chance of scanning the surrounding area for an escape route. "We're being dragged in. There's something hidden in there." Vera's voice was low, almost too quiet to hear, but Jonathan could feel the intensity in her words. "It's the isolationists." Jonathan turned to her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Isolationists? What are you talking about? Who are they?" Vera's gaze shifted toward the view screen, her face etched with worry. "A faction of my people. Radical extremists who oppose the idea of peaceful relations with Earth. They believe that Australis should remain isolated from all other species, particularly humans. They're dangerous, Jonathan. And they have the technology to make this happen." Jonathan felt a chill run down his spine. He knew the Krell were a threat, but this? The idea that a faction of Vera's own people had the power to pull ships into hidden bases was chilling. The tension in the ship was palpable as the Nomad hurtled toward the asteroid belt. "What are they after?" Jonathan asked, his voice grim. "Why pull us in? And how do you know they're here?" "Their base is hidden among the asteroids," Vera replied, her voice tight. "They've kept it secret, even from the rest of Australis. They've been operating in the shadows, trying to derail any efforts to build interstellar peace. And they have access to advanced technology that could cripple us. If they've identified my biosignature, they know who I am." Jonathan's hands clenched around the control panel as he fought with the thrusters, but it was no use. The ship was locked in, the tractor beams pull relentless. The asteroids loomed closer, their jagged forms filling the view screen, casting an ominous shadow over the Nomad. "This is bad," Jonathan muttered, his mind racing. He could feel the walls of the ship pressing in around him, the thin metal hull of the Nomad nothing more than a fragile shell in the face of the vast, cold void. The isolationists, what did they want with Vera? And what would they do to them both once they were caught? Vera's eyes narrowed, her face set with determination. "They won't kill me. Not yet. I'm too valuable to them alive. But you. They'll want to capture you. I don't know how much time we have." Jonathan gritted his teeth, his pulse quickening. "We'll make it out. We can't let them take us." He brought up the ship's tactical readouts again, scanning for any weak points in the pull. The asteroid belt was closing in, and the Nomad was being dragged into the center of the mass. He needed to think fast. The ship's small size and lack of heavy armor meant they couldn't take much damage. If they were pulled into the asteroid belt, they'd be sitting ducks. The rocks were too dense, the space too cluttered for a quick escape. As the pull intensified, Jonathan's mind began to work quickly, calculating options. They needed to break free of the tractor beam's hold, but they were running out of time. The base could be any one of the larger asteroids, hidden within the chaotic mess of smaller ones. The shuddering of the ship intensified, and then suddenly, the metal groaned a warning that something was giving way. A sharp hiss echoed through the ship's hull, signaling a loss of pressure in one of the aft compartments. Jonathan cursed again, swearing under his breath. They were too far in. They couldn't just run. They had to fight their way out. "We're not making it out unless we do something drastic," Jonathan said, looking at Vera. His eyes hardened, and a grim resolve set in. "I'll need you to stay sharp. This is going to get ugly. If we're going to survive, we're going to need to fight. You ready?" Vera looked at him, her expression unreadable. But Jonathan could see the determination in her eyes, the same fire that had driven her to survive the Krell, the same fire that would help her get out of this alive. "I'm ready. I won't be a prisoner again." Jonathan turned back to the controls. He didn't have much choice now. The ship's course was locked in, and if the tractor beam's grip wasn't broken soon, they'd be pulled into the heart of the asteroid field. The isolationists would be waiting, and every second that passed brought them closer to capture. The view outside the ship grew darker as they neared the center of the asteroid belt. Jonathan's eyes scanned the incoming data, his heart racing. There was a brief, fleeting moment of calm, the briefest of RESPites. The isolationists had control of the ship's course. But Jonathan had one final ace up his sleeve. He turned toward the back of the ship, reaching for the emergency override. The powerful thrusters that ran along the ship's sides were primed for a moment like this when escape was the only option. Jonathan took a deep breath and activated the emergency boosters. The ship lurched forward with a jolt, the sudden force of the maneuver pulling them free from the tractor beam's grip. The ship rocketed forward, darting between the asteroids in a blind, frantic escape. Jonathan's heart raced as he fought to maintain control of the ship. They weren't out of danger yet. The isolationists would come after them, and the asteroid field offered no cover. But for the first time in what felt like forever, they were free. Jonathan's voice was firm as he navigated the Nomad out of the asteroid belt. "Hold on, Vera. This isn't over." The ship shuddered again, but they had broken free of the tractor beam. For now, the metallic corridors of the isolationist base were cold and oppressive, their smooth, featureless walls giving no hint of the secrets they held. The artificial lighting above flickered intermittently, casting sharp, jagged shadows across the hallways. The ship's low hum vibrated through the floor beneath Jonathan's boots as he and Vera sprinted through the narrow passage, their footsteps echoing in the silence that hung in the air. Jonathan's breath was ragged, each exhale heavy with the tension of the situation. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder, the distinct echo of footsteps and the metallic clatter of armed isolationist forces closing in. They couldn't outrun them. The station's labyrinthine design worked against them. Every hallway, every corner seemed to lead to another locked door or empty passage. Jonathan's pulse thudded in his ears, but he didn't dare slow down. His mind was sharp, calculating. He could hear the rhythm of their steps, feel the weight of every moment as if time itself was stretching, pulling them closer to their inevitable confrontation. Vera, still shaken from the escape through the asteroid belt, clung to his side, her once steady pace faltering. The wounds on her arms, although bandaged, were still raw, and the exhaustion from their recent ordeal weighed on her like a heavy shroud. But there was something in her eyes now, determination, a fire that had never fully extinguished, despite the betrayal and bloodshed she had witnessed. "We're almost there," Jonathan muttered under his breath, his hand tight on the blaster holstered at his side. They had to make it to the hidden ship. It was their only chance. Ahead, the corridor split into two directions. Jonathan hesitated, instinctively choosing the right path. The faint whirring of machinery and the distant sound of doors opening warned him of the danger that lay ahead. The isolationists were moving. The Nomad cut through the void of space like a dart, the hum of its engines vibrating through the floor and walls. Jonathan sat at the controls, his hands steady despite the weight of everything that was at stake. His eyes were fixed on the distant gleam of Helio Station, a massive structure suspended in the blackness, its rotating rings casting long shadows that stretched out into space. The station was a marvel of engineering, a hub of diplomacy, commerce, and knowledge. It was here that the fate of not just Vera's people, but potentially the entire sector, would be decided. The dark expanse outside the viewport seemed to press in around them, as though the very fabric of space itself was holding its breath. The stars twinkled, distant and cold, a reminder of how small they all were against the enormity of the universe. But inside the cockpit of the Nomad, there was only one thing that mattered now: the confrontation ahead. Vera sat beside him, her posture tense, but there was a calm resolve in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The journey from the isolationist base had been harrowing, and her grief over Ter's sacrifice still weighed heavily on her, but she had grown stronger in the process. There was no turning back now. She had made the decision to stand and fight, to expose the truth, no matter the cost. "Helio station ahead," Jonathan said, his voice low, barely above a whisper. He felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him as the familiar station grew larger in the viewport. It was here that they would confront the isolationists, those who had worked in the shadows to manipulate the truth, those who had conspired against peace. Vera nodded, her amber eyes still locked on the station. "We have to expose them all, Jonathan. Every last one of them." Jonathan's heart clenched at her words. He knew what this meant. If they failed here, everything the Nomad, their fight, Ter's sacrifice would have been for nothing. But if they succeeded, if they exposed the isolationists for who they truly were, it could change everything. For Vera. For Astralis. For Earth. As the Nomad approached the docking bay of Helio Station, Jonathan initiated the final approach sequence, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. The station's silhouette grew closer, its massive rotating rings slowly coming into view. The lights of the station flickered as they passed through the docking perimeter, signaling to Jonathan that their arrival had not gone unnoticed. The silence in the cockpit thickened. "We're here," Jonathan said, his voice steadier now, a slight sense of finality in it. "Are you ready for this?" Vera didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the station, the reflection of its lights shimmering in her amber gaze. She was ready, more than ready, he could tell. But there was something else there too, something deeper, something born from everything she had been through. Her people's politics. Her mission. Ter's sacrifice. "I'm ready," she said finally, her voice firm. "I can't live in hiding anymore. Neither can you." The docking sequence completed with a soft thud as the ship's hull sealed with the docking bay. The inner door slid open, revealing the sterile, high-tech interior of Helio Station. Jonathan took a deep breath as he stood, checking the weapons secured at his side and the case of evidence containing the damning information they had recovered. It was time. The ramp lowered with a soft hiss, and Jonathan stepped out of the ship first, followed by Vera. The familiar scent of recycled air and sterile metal met his senses as they made their way toward the security checkpoint. But this time, it felt different. Every step they took felt weighted with the knowledge that everything was about to change. They were greeted by a handful of station guards, their faces impassive as they scanned the newcomers. Jonathan's pulse quickened, but he maintained his composure, meeting the eyes of the guards with a steady gaze. "I'm here to see Ambassador Nan," Vera said, her voice crisp, her posture straight. There was no hesitation now. She had the authority of a diplomat, but more than that, she had the resolve of someone who had made peace with the path ahead. The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances, but one of them stepped forward and nodded. "Right this way, ma'am." The corridors of Helio Station were sleek and polished, a far cry from the grim, utilitarian hallways of the isolationist base. They moved swiftly through the station, their footsteps echoing in the quiet, sterile halls. As they approached the central diplomatic chambers, Jonathan couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. He had no idea how the isolationists would react, or if they had already anticipated their arrival. But one thing was certain, they couldn't back down now. They reached the chamber, a massive hall lined with holographic displays of star maps, trade routes, and diplomatic relations. At the far end, seated at an elevated desk, was Ambassador Nan. The elderly diplomat was a towering figure, his indigo skin rich with age and wisdom. His elaborate silver robes shimmered in the soft lighting of the room, and his gaze, sharp yet welcoming, fell on Jonathan and Vera as they entered. "Vera Kix," Nan said, his voice rich and deep, the sound reverberating off the walls. "I see you've returned, and with company. I wasn't expecting this." "I've come to expose the truth, Ambassador," Vera said, her voice unwavering. "The isolationists are a threat to peace. And I have the evidence to prove it." Nan's brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Instead, he waved a hand toward a large screen behind him, which flickered to life, displaying a map of Astralis and Earth, their territories marked in glowing lines. Jonathan stepped forward, holding up the case of evidence that contained the damning information, the data that would expose the isolationists' plot to sabotage diplomatic relations and manipulate the Krell. "I have everything you need to stop them," Jonathan said, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it now. "The isolationists have been playing both sides. They've used the Krell as pawns to instigate conflict between Earth and Astralis. They want war, not peace." Vera stepped forward, her gaze never leaving Nan's. "I've seen the destruction they've caused. The loss of innocent lives. The manipulation of my people. It ends now. You have to believe us." There was a moment of silence as Nan studied them, his sharp gaze flicking between Vera and Jonathan. He didn't speak, but the air was thick with the weight of unspoken words. "Show him, Jonathan," Vera said, her voice resolute. Jonathan opened the case, revealing the data and evidence they had gathered: the intercepted transmissions, the damning documents, and the proof of the isolationists' involvement in the sabotage. The screen flickered again, displaying the evidence in stark clarity for Nan to see. The truth was undeniable. The plot was exposed. For a long moment, Nan said nothing. The room was so quiet that the hum of the station seemed deafening. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of years of diplomacy. This is more than I anticipated," Nan said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "The isolationists have been working in the shadows for too long. They've manipulated us all." Vera's eyes never left him. "It's not just them, Ambassador. We need to act. Now. Before they can do any more damage." Nan's expression softened, and for the first time, Jonathan saw a flicker of uncertainty in the ambassador's eyes. "You're right. We can't let them destroy everything we've worked for." With a solemn nod, Nan turned toward the other diplomats present in the room, who had been silently observing. One by one, their expressions shifted from skepticism to realization, as the evidence began to sink in. "You've done well, both of you," Nan said quietly. "We'll expose the isolationists. Their time in the shadows is over." But there was still more to do. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the hall, and Jonathan's eyes flicked to the door. A group of guards entered, their expressions tight, but when they saw Nan's nod of approval, they stopped in their tracks. The ambassador stood, his tall frame imposing. "I will call for a formal session," Nan said. "The bonding ceremony must take place immediately. This is our way. A declaration of truth, a bond that cannot be denied." Vera's face paled slightly, but she straightened her posture, her resolve unshaken. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. The room around them began to hum with activity, preparations for the ceremony taking place at lightning speed. The isolationists' conspiracy had been exposed, and the bonding ceremony would serve to cement their truth, making it undeniable to everyone present. The truth would no longer be hidden. And together, Jonathan and Vera would see it through to the end. Thank you for watching the UFO Enigma. We hope today's story has taken you into a world full of mystery and intrigue. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. See you in the next adventure.